Well, 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 it sure has been a little bit, hasn't it? I've missed you guys. I hope you guys have missed me a little bit. My life has been pretty crazy over the last few months, so hopefully I'm going to be back on track here, putting out some videos again. I really have missed this, so hopefully this will be fun. Anyway, without further ado, ERMES Gasparini versus Michael Todd. I thought this match was super, super cool, and really, I think that it could have gone either way. I think that both guys didn't really have what they wanted. Neither guy finished this match in orthodox arm wrestling. They were both in super, super ugly positions by the end of it. And I think that as far as the matchup between ERMES and Michael goes, that's just what it's going to be like. There's going to have to be a lot of super ugly arm wrestling for either guy to win. And I think realistically, the only way for the match to finish is in a flop press. If Michael ended up winning, he would have pressed ERMES, and ERMES ended up winning every single round in a flop press. Now, the first thing that I noticed right off the go, I think Michael did very, very well in the start, and this is right at the very first round, this freeze frame right here, and notice how high Michael's index knuckle is. Sometimes in the past, I've noticed that Michael does not do the best job getting his index knuckle high. It looks like he's almost low gripping his opponent and trying to top roll. And I think that that's sometimes just because he doesn't really fight in the setup all that much. He wants to have a fair grip, and oftentimes his opponent is really taking advantage of that and getting way up over the top of him. I think Gennady versus Michael was one of the matches where that was the most apparent. Michael was just starting every round underneath, super low grip. But here, I think maybe Michael's knuckle height is ever so slightly higher than ERMES, so I think he did great in that area. And realistically, the only way that Michael is going to lose a match is someone climbing up and over the top of him. I think that at this point in 2025, in the sport of arm wrestling, no one on the earth is going to flop press Michael Todd with a little bit of a lower grip. So something like what Kamil Jablonski did, or what we saw Gennady trying at one point, where he's more kind of low on the wrist of Michael Todd. I think if you're going to flop press Michael, you have to do it high on the hand, more through the knuckle. And that's what ERMES did. So this match starts. Michael has a good high knuckle position, but he is a lot more open. And then we're going to go to the next frame here. And what we saw happening is if ERMES tries to kind of go sideways toward the other side of the table, of course, that's not really going to benefit his hand and wrist. He's lowering his hand height by going sideways. So instead, what we saw ERMES doing a lot through this match is he would kind of allow Michael onto the winning side of the table, and then ERMES would use that super strong elbow flexor. He would open his hand, kick back a little bit, kick his wrist back, maybe supinate a little bit, and by allowing the match to go to his losing side of the table, he was able to climb more effectively. If you guys have never tried that before, oftentimes allowing the match to sweep to the losing side of the table will benefit you in terms of climbing and gaining height over your opponent. We see Devin Larratt doing this all the time. And ERMES Gasparini did it very effectively. He was able to climb and adjust over Michael Todd. But Michael did not just completely allow that part of the match to be a defeat on his side. He also climbed with ERMES. And ERMES did outclimb Michael Todd, but he didn't completely outclimb him. So by the time that ERMES had gained height, it wasn't to where he just had a super dominant position. Michael had also climbed a little bit, and ERMES was higher, but it still wasn't ideal. He didn't have Michael like way down on his wrist trying to dad move him, like sometimes people are able to do when they climb in a match. But we'll see on this next frame that it's a little bit awkward. So if you're trying to pick between these two positions, obviously ERMES' position is better. But you can still see that Michael is very high into ERMES' hands, and he's putting a lot of pressure into ERMES' fingertips. So what happens from here is ERMES is still not going to be able to flop press, to maintain hand control while pressing from this position. He's going to have to do a flop press. So ERMES realizes that. He continues to climb. He gets from here, where it's a little bit more neutral, he gets all the way out to here. And if ERMES' fingers were a little bit more down the wrist of Michael Todd, I don't think there's any way he was going to be able to flop press. He knew that his win condition was not to flop press through Michael's arm, but rather to flop press through his radial deviation, or in other words, to flop press through his wrist rise. And that's what ERMES does so well in this match. I don't think that anyone on the planet can defeat Michael's arm right now. His elbow flexor angle, when you take into account his kind of sticky king's move position, it might just be the strongest in the world, maybe behind Levon, but I don't think anyone is just going to press through him in terms of his arm power if they're trying to press more around his wrist. But if you press through his knuckles, like what you can see ERMES doing right here, where ERMES is super high, take a look at where ERMES' thumb is, and ERMES is putting all that pressure down into Michael's knuckles, and you can see Michael's knuckle height is dropping. So if ERMES' hand right here had been right here, down on Michael's wrist, it would have been very different. I don't think he could have pressed through Michael's king's move at all, but because he was pressing through the knuckles, Michael's pinky knuckle dips below the pad a lot in this match. That's the only way he ever ends up getting pinned, is his pinky knuckle just barely dips below the pin height. His arm angle most of the time actually looks pretty good, but it's this radial deviation angle or his wrist angle, which is what ERMES was able to attack. So I think ERMES did such a great job throughout this match. It may have looked ugly, but there was definitely a lot of technical aspects going into this, the battle plan from ERMES. And I think all the way from the beginning, he kind of knew he's probably, as soon as he tested those waters of going sideways, he's not just going to be able to control this match, and he's not going to be able to climb high enough to where he can press Michael while maintaining hand control. So once that moment happens, he knows he's going to have to flop press. But realistically, he can't flop press through his arm, so he decides instead to flop press through the wrist. So he climbs, he gives away center table in order to climb even higher, knowing that he's also going to allow Michael to climb in the process, but he's okay with that as long as he can access the flop press through Michael's knuckles and cause that pinky finger to dip below the pin pad. So let me know what you guys thought about this match. I think it did kind of look ugly, but at the same time, underneath the surface, I think it really was a technical masterclass by ERMES Gasparini on how to defeat a king's mover if their radial deviation is their weak point. And most of the time, that's going to be the case. Your wrist, your ability to make your knuckles rise is almost always going to be weaker than your ability to make your overall hand height rise through your elbow flexor and your internal shoulder rotator, however you're causing that back pressure to occur in a match. But I thought this was awesome, and I think that potentially Michael could make some adjustments in the setup, maybe the way that he was, instead of kind of allowing the match to sweep over here to this side of the table. Potentially, if you're Michael Todd, you actually want the match to go to your losing side of the table. So maybe you don't allow this position to occur. Instead, you actually try to externally rotate yourself, cause the match to go back to your losing side of the table. That might sound counterintuitive, but sometimes that can be effective. But I think that especially if this match was 4 rounds, first to 4 rounds to win the entire super match instead of first to 3 rounds, and Michael made some slight adjustments and he works on his radial deviation a little bit, potentially this match could be different. I would love to see it again in the future. I think it could be an all-out war, but for now, I'm super excited to see ERMES Gasparini take on Levon Saginishvili in a little bit here. All right, thank you guys for watching. I'll talk to you later.